Jeff again here. I want to do another one of these videos on, I call them the four or the 5Ds for American culture. And this all came kind of as a serendipity moment, a reflection about 30 years ago. Getting on nearly 30 years ago, when my wife and I had moved to the States, back to the U.S. from France, and it was her first couple of years living in the United States. And it was not the first 6 months. It was then when we were in Peoria, so it would have been the first 2 years. Okay, and that was during the Clinton election, and she couldn't vote, but she had a job where she was doing daycare, and she had a lot of time doing daycare with young babies, and so she had a lot of time to discuss with her colleague, and I'm not going to say the colleague's name, and the interesting is, and she being French, who love to debate things, right? The French are really good at debating things, and they take philosophy courses in high school. Everyone has to take a philosophy course their last year in high school, so they're used to you're debating things, and they're very good at this, and they're very strong, and they're very good technically, and debating their ideas. They're taught to do this. Americans are not taught to do this very well, right? And as she was having a discussion over the understanding the points of what Clinton. Now this was in the heartland of America. Okay, I'm going to say that Peoria, Illinois, heartland of America. And as she, as a foreigner with an open mindset, was sitting there discussing with a colleague, and as the discussion got on, her colleague says, "We need to stop talking. We need to stop disputing." And she said at that time, she says, "But we're not disputing. We're discussing." And the colleague said, "No, we're disputing. We need to stop the discussion." And my wife came back home that evening, was very disturbed about that whole thing, one to more. And I kind of laughed, and I said, "Well, that's how it is here, right?" And now I want to kind of bring up the 5Ds, right? And that experience that she had, and how this fits into what I call the 5Ds. I think it's 4 or 5. I think it's pretty much 5 here. So what I'll say is that Americans in general, North Americans, so the Americans from United States of America, not the United States of America of Mexico, right? Because there's another one, right? The Americans in general, okay, I'm making a generalization. Yes, it's always bad to make generalizations, but we can do this, right? Because there are some tendencies that can be found. So Americans in general, and this is the whole thing of we're going to see, and I think it was really important to see during the Trump presidential, during his 45th, as a term, as the president, the whole thing of the debate over, who's right or wrong, who's pushing, that was very polemic and very, you can see the dichotomy, you can see the two sides of the fence. It was really clear, right? And this brought up this whole thing of what I'm called the 5Ds. So what's the 5Ds? So I say that Americans in general, we struggle with the difference between dialogue, discussion, debate, dispute, and destruction. Okay, I'm going to say that again here. I don't have this on a specific order. I do have a couple of them, but I do have the last ones. So Americans struggle with the difference between discussion, dialogue, debate, dispute, and destruction. And sometimes there is an amalgam. They're all the same thing, because they cannot be. And this is where this whole talk that my wife had been having with this colleague, where my wife saw it as a discussion, It was discussion, and it probably turned into a debate. It probably at some point turned into a debate about the ideas, but the colleagues saw it as a dispute, right? The American colleagues saw this as a dispute in that area of the country, right? And we did see for the 2 years that we lived in that area of the country, it was kind of hard to adjust to it, right? Even I felt kind of a fish out of water because I came from the West Coast. Well, I grew up early formative years in Minnesota, which is still Midwest, but I spent everything from age 9 on, age 8 on the West Coast, which is very different. In the West Coast, is very different than the Midwest, right? In the heartland. And then I came and lived in France too after that for 5 years, and then moved back with my wife, and that was an experience for both of us, right? She felt kind of in central Illinois. She felt kind of in a weird spot, and I also felt in a weird spot, having lived, for so long in a different subculture, right? In different subcultures, and so this whole, and again, I'm making a statement here about this grouping together of these mixing together of these. Whereas I found in France for the more than 3 decades over here that the people make a very distinct. They're very distinct, and they distinguish between a discussion, which can be dialogue, right? Dialogue and discussion are pretty close. But then when it gets to debate, it's a different thing, right? And then dispute is still another level. And then destruction is like total, just killing it, right? And I think that Americans, because of our nature of not wanting to have, it needs to be black or white, right? It needs to be binary. It needs to be on or off. It needs to be 0 or 1. There aren't third flavors, which I talk about in the other parts of this book. Because of that, this leads to this mixing up of these 5 Ds, where they all kind of seem to be the same thing, and they aren't always in other cultures. They can be different. So it's something to think about. I'm making my own opinion here, based on life experiences. Some of these things are things you do find in training manuals and in books, and you find they're dealt with and talked about. This is one thing I've actually not seen not well described at all, and so I think this is why I'm making this video, because it's lacking, right? Here I'm not citing specific reference saying so and so said this and so said that. Here I make my own statements and trying to think of the examples where they might have been written, but I haven't seen it, right? I don't recall that. So it's and someone else actually knows about this and knows about someone that's actually said the same thing. Please tell me. I'm totally open to receiving quotes and citations and understanding where someone else say. I want to cite them and give them credit. Credit's due, even if I haven't read it. But I want to be ignorant of that. But I think. What do you think about these mixing up the 5 Ds, Americans, and compare with the other cultures? What is your culture? Where do you come from where you may make the distinction very much, and you found that Americans don't make that distinction? That they can mix this up, and that causes confusion. Causes misunderstanding between cultures. And I think that's a lot of things that we've come up with during the whole period of the Trump presidency. That astonished or bewildered a lot of people from other countries about how to understand Trump, right? Or how to understand Americans that were following Trump, and not just Americans following Trump, but there's still some core values that everyone actually grows up with in the States in general. Okay, in general. Now there might be stronger in some areas of the country, right? Much more stronger in certain places than other places, but there's this general kind of thing that people understand each other and they understand how to function with each other. And in general, I think if there's anywhere I've seen that we don't have it. I mean, there are always going to be subcultural differences, right, across different regions and stuff. It's never the same vanilla flavor right. But there are going to be general trends. And just like in French one, you're going to have general trends, and in German ones, you're going to have general trends, but you're going to always have exceptions. And I do want to say there are always going to be exceptions, right? So don't take this as that this is always is. There are always exceptions. It's just that the exceptions tend to be a small value of less than 20%, right? It's the Pareto triangle. The Pareto, it's always 80-20, right? So in general. So that's the thoughts for today on the 5 Ds. Let me know what you think about it. At least the 5 Ds for Americans, and let me know if you think it's valid. Maybe you got another D or 4 more or 5 other Ds that might be applied, and that would be good. Then you get 10 Ds, right? So let me know. Thanks so much.